Hey everybody, today we're going to do a tier ranking of all the 50 state nicknames. So I got on Tier Ranker and they've got a nice one set up to do the rankings. The only problem is some of these are out of order and they do have them listed twice. So we're going to start from the bottom up and go in reverse alphabetical. Now I've got tiers A, B, C, D, and F. I don't really do an S tier or a Z tier. And the big thing to mention up front is this is completely subjective. You're going to have your own reasons for your own rankings. There's different ways to do it. One of the main factors is the notability of the nickname. The other thing is just how well it strikes me and how well I think it suits the state. Now I'm sure all of these nicknames have a rich history behind them. Some of them everybody knows. Some of them hardly anybody is going to know. So there's not going to be many terrible rankings on here because I think they're all unique in some way. Some of them you have to do a little bit of digging on the history, but some of them are just universally appealing without knowing the background. So this is not to favor or disparage any particular states. This is mostly just taking a stroll through the nicknames and see which ones stick out, which ones don't. So we've got 50 to get through. Let's get started. First here we have Wyoming. That has three actually listed: the Cowboy State, the Equality State, and Big Wyoming. I always knew it as the Equality State. That's what I'm going to go by here. And I always thought that was a little bit cheesy in my opinion. I get that it goes back to voting rights, but it just doesn't land too well for me. For me, it's kind of on par with saying something like the Awesome State. It doesn't do a whole lot for me, but I'm going to put it in the C tier. Not many of these are going to be low. Again, this should be a leisure ranking and nothing super serious. Next, we have Wisconsin, the Badger State, and there's going to be a lot of these states that are named after an animal or plant or flower associated with the state. This is a tough call. It's kind of CD territory, similar to Wyoming. I'll put it in C. Some people do know the Badger State, but I don't think it's really all that appealing. Also, I'm not going by any of the pictures here. I'm just going by the state nickname. Next, West Virginia, the Mountain State. This is a little generic in my opinion. I know there's mountains in West Virginia. There's also mountains in other states. This is similar to me as the other two. I'm going to put this in the C to D territory. I'll put it in C. I don't think I have to be overly critical about the nickname. Next, Washington, the Evergreen State. That's a little bit better than these other three so far. That could go in the low B territory. We'll put it there for now. Next, Virginia, the Old Dominion State. This one I actually never really cared for. Again, there's going to be a history behind it. Every time I would see it, it just never really hit me the right way. I would put it in D. Maybe the notability bumps it up to C. I'm going to put it in the high D territory. I don't know if anything's going to hit F, given these are just nicknames. If you're from Virginia, no offense whatsoever, but Old Dominion just really doesn't do it for me. Next, Vermont, the Green Mountain State. It's a little bit more descriptive than West Virginia, the Mountain State. I'm going to also put this in the C tier. It's a little bit higher than these other ones. This time we have a color of a mountain, not just a mountain, so that's good enough for C. Next, we have Utah, the Beehive State. I don't know how many people know this is the Beehive State. You probably wouldn't think of this as the Beehive State, but at the same time, it does make me want to look even more into the backstory, but I do think it does sound pretty cool. It's not as iconic as some of these other ones, but I'm going to put this in the B tier. This is kind of a cool sounding name. Next, we have Texas, the Lone Star State. This one is iconic. Everybody knows this for sure. We're going to put this in the A tier. Personally, I would put it in the B tier, but the notability is going to bump it up to A. Next, we have Tennessee, the Volunteer State. This to me is a little generic, has a nice sentiment, but I'm going to also put this in the D tier. Next, Mount Rushmore State. That is South Dakota. That is in South Dakota, but it doesn't do a whole lot for me. I'm going to put this in the low C tier. Next, South Carolina, the Palmetto State. I guess it's okay. Not much to say about it. We'll put it in the C tier. Now we have Rhode Island, the Ocean State. That to me is also pretty average. We'll put that in the C tier. Next, Pennsylvania, the Keystone State. This is a little bit notable. Not the best, but I think it's enough to get into the B tier. Next, we have Oregon, the Beaver State. That's a great picture, but just the Beaver State, it's similar to the Badger State. We're going to put that in the middle of the pack in the C tier. Next, the Sooner State, Oklahoma. This is another one to look more into the history of. It is kind of iconic. We could put this in the low B tier. Next, we have Ohio, the Buckeye State. Buckeyes are trees. Doesn't do a whole lot for me, but it is kind of iconic. It at least has to go in the C tier. Maybe bump it up to B. I'm going to put it in the high C tier. Next, we have North Dakota, the Peace Garden State. The International Peace Garden that is on the Canadian border. I believe that's what the nickname is from. It's alright. I'll put it in the C tier. Next, we have North Carolina, the Tar Heel State. This one is also kind of iconic. Sounds pretty blue collar. I actually kind of like this one a little bit. I'm going to put this probably in the A tier, actually. I want to have at least a couple in the A tier, but I think that's a pretty solid nickname. Next, we have New York, the Empire State. This is similar to Texas, pretty iconic. We'll have to put this also in the A tier. Everybody knows that one. Seems to suit the state well. Let's put it on the top tier. Next, New Mexico, Land of Enchantment. For whatever reason, it's not the Enchantment State, it's Land of Enchantment. I do like this one. I'm going to put this in the B tier, and we'll leave it at that. Next, the Garden State, New Jersey. This one is fairly iconic. Most people know this one. I'll put it in the B tier as well. Next, New Hampshire, the Granite State. This one is semi-common as well. We'll put it in the C tier. It's okay. Not great, not bad. Next, Nevada, the Silver State. This one I kind of like. It has a little bit of alliteration. Silver State flows pretty well, seems to describe the state. I'm going to put this in the B tier. Next, Nebraska, the Cornhusker State. This one is a little bit iconic as well. I'll put this in the high C tier, maybe low B. We'll go high C tier. Next, we have Montana, the Treasure State. This would go good with New Mexico, Land of Enchantment. I'm going to put this in the high B tier. This could go A. We'll put it in the B tier. Next, we have Missouri, the Show Me State. This is a unique one, but almost everybody's heard of it. It leaves a lot to the imagination. We'll put it in the B tier. Next, we have Mississippi, the Magnolia State. This is pretty basic. I'm going to put it in the C tier. Next, Minnesota, the North Star State. This is not too bad. This is maybe a low B, high C. I'll put it in a low B. Next, Michigan, the Great Lakes State. It's certainly surrounded by a lot of lakes. It makes sense. I'm going to put this in the high C tier. Could get in the B. We'll put it in C. Next, Massachusetts, the Bay State. This is similar to Michigan in a sense with the water. We're going to also put this in the C tier. Next, Maryland, the Old Line State. This one, I never really cared for either. I'm going to have to put this in the D tier. Next, Maine, the Pine Tree State. It's pretty basic. We'll just put it in the middle of the pack in the C tier. Louisiana, the Pelican State. That's also going to be in the C tier. Kentucky, the Bluegrass State. That's alright, I think that'll also go in the C tier. And the next one is Kansas, the Sunflower State. It's another one of these like the Magnolia State. I'm going to put this in the C tier as well. It probably suits the state. It's just not iconic, and it's just not all that universally appealing. Next, Iowa, the Hawkeye State. This reminds me of Ohio, the Buckeye State. And I could see putting both of these in the B tier. This does have a level of notability. I'm going to put it in the high C, but I do understand putting it in the B. Next, Indiana, the Hoosier State. To me, this one is more iconic than the Buckeye State or the Hawkeye State. That is going to go in the B tier. Next, Illinois, the Prairie State. This sounds kind of bland. Not much exciting about prairies. I'm going to actually put this in the high D tier. Next, Idaho, the Gem State. It's going right in the C tier. Sounds intriguing. If I'm looking for some gems, I'm probably going to go to Idaho. Next, Hawaii, the Aloha State. This is CB territory. We'll put another one up in the B tier. It's not excellent, but it's a decent nickname. Next, Georgia, the Peach State. It's kind of generic. We're going to put that in the C tier. I suppose it's a little bit better than if they pick something like the Peanut State. Next, we have the Sunshine State, Florida. That's decent. We're also going to put that in the B tier. Next, we have Delaware, the First State. That's fairly interesting, has some history behind it. We're going to put that in the B tier as well. Connecticut, the Constitution State. Again, I'm sure the history is there. I don't think it's a well-known nickname. This is kind of borderline C and D. We'll put this in the C tier. Next, we have Colorado, the Centennial State. This is similar to Delaware, the First State in a sense, but Delaware really nails it. They were the first state. Colorado just became a state 100 years in. I'm going to put this in the D tier. I think it's all right, but it's a little bit weaker than some of these other ones. Next, California, the Golden State. This is iconic. This is going to go in the A tier. Next, we have Arkansas, the Natural State. That's an okay one. It probably makes sense for Arkansas. A lot of natural resources there, wildlife, etc. So it goes in the C tier. Next, Arizona, the Grand Canyon State. This is sort of like South Dakota and the Mount Rushmore State. It's alright. The Grand Canyon is in Arizona, but to me it's just kind of average. Next, Alaska, the Last Frontier. The Frontier State might be a little bit better, but this is still decent. I'm going to put this one up in the B tier. Next, Alabama, the Yellowhammer State. Maybe this one would be better if it was actually just a yellow hammer. But again, they're going for the wildlife. we'll put it in the C tier. And that's actually all of them. The rest are duplicates, and this was pretty challenging. I didn't put anything in the F tier. I think they're all good in some way, but some of them just strike you more than the others. Some of them you know more about. Some of them you have to do some digging into the history. But I think this was more about just taking a tour of the nicknames. I think this was pretty fun. Some of these I forgot about. Some of them I didn't even know. I like the little pictures that go with it. Helps you connect with the states. So no offense to any of these states in the D tier, but I had to have some way to differentiate the different nicknames. Congrats on the A and the B tier. The C is mostly just generic, and you're definitely going to have different rankings, so let me know in the comments. I know you're going to strongly disagree with at least one or two of these. That's fine. Which do you really like? Which fall flat for you? Which do you think apply to the states most accurately? Which do you think need an update? Which do you think are the most iconic? Which have you never heard of? Let me know any of your thoughts down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.